Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Before I start, some of you noticed that or maybe you didn't, that I started these boot camp sessions 5 minutes earlier. Actually, let me go ahead and put an alarm. Um, I started these 5 minutes earlier because it just works better for my schedule. After I wrap up, I save the recording and I email the recordings out. And then I go about my day. But those extra 5 minutes are very, very helpful to me. Another thing that I wanted to point out was that last session, I did notice some of you were trying to get in the room. And I'm sorry I didn't get you in the room. I mean, obviously, I don't have a moderator, but I think I'm gonna probably uh, I think I'm gonna have it so that if anyone is trying to get in after 7:35, um, it's okay. Like you can catch the next one. Because I think what happens is that once I get in the zone, I forget to check. Um, I forget to check that who's coming in or who's trying to come in. So forgive me for that. For those of you who are trying to get in and we're in the waiting room for I don't know how long. That's the new rule. 7:35, you have until 7:35 to get in. If you're trying to get in after 7:35, you can catch the next one. You can catch the recording. It's all good. All right, so today I think we're going to talk about perfection. We're going to talk about perfection, possibly a little bit of fear of getting help, and things like that. So what does it mean to be perfect? I think that perfection is interesting, right? Perfection is interesting. Like, why do we strive for it? Even though we know that um, perfection isn't everything. For me, right, it's like this collective memory of having to be perfect, having to get it, having to have it all together as a youth, not only at home, but in school, right? If you don't get an A is perfect. An A plus is perfecter. There's memory. I have this memory of needing to be perfect, right? And if it's not perfect, it's not done well. Um, but that's false. That is false. That is a lie. And it will get you fucked up. Perfection will get you fucked up. Perfection got me fucked up many times. Because in trying to be perfect, it's like your real raw self is neglected, right? Your real raw self is neglected when trying to be perfect. Because none of us are perfect, right? We weren't created perfect, although I did call my honeys perfect. But none of us are created perfect, right? And what do I mean by that? We weren't put here to be perfect, right? Nature is perfect in a way where things have a purpose and things like an acorn and the we call that spiral. Uh what do you call that spiral that's like the it's in everything? I don't know how I forgot, but patterns, designs, some things are perfect, right? Um, that isn't to say that we have to be perfect in our actions. That isn't to say that we have to be perfect because there is no such thing. Sometimes what you think perfection is, what you think perfection wants is not that at all, right? Let me explain that because, like, what were words right now? When you think about art, right? And you're thinking about the perfect piece, you're thinking about the perfect piece. Who are you considering to judge that perfection, right? There's somebody judging that perfection, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't know what perfect is. Who are you appointing to judge what is perfect and what is not? Okay? When you're thinking of the perfect art piece, who are you appointing to judge if it's perfect or not? If it's yourself, how do you know what perfect is? What tells you that something is perfect? Right? It might be, something that was taught to you in school. It might be something that your parents um, told you was perfect. For me, I had to be perfect in a way out of fear of letting everything go to shit, right? A little bit about my upbringing without giving you a little bit about my upbringing. Um, the people appointed to be the caretakers in my family um, dropped the ball many times. And as a kid, I and in that same breath, they also valued perfection. So as a kid, I was like, all right, I can't drop the ball or else things are gonna go to shit. I have to be perfect. Right. And so I was that. I don't know how many of y'all have seen Encanto. I just saw it for the first time this weekend. And the older sister, the one that has it all together. And if she don't have it all together, then she's worthless. Like I that was me. They read my diary. That was me. And it's interesting how that happened because nobody told me to be perfect. Nobody told me necessarily to be perfect. It's just the things that were rewarded got filed as perfection, right? Nobody told me to be perfect, but because we all desire love, because we all desire being wanted, being liked, right? Not being alone. Some things filed itself as perfection. So, as a kid, right? For instance, I was the oldest. I am the oldest. I am still the oldest. Um, and when certain people dropped the ball, I saw how frustrated they were with everyone for the rest of the day, right? I'm trying not to give names here, but you know what? Y'all family. If my mother were to drop the ball or my father were to drop the ball, I would pick up the slack because I feared what would happen if it wasn't perfect, right? If they drop the ball for the rest of the day, it is ruined for me as a child, right? I would be the one getting punished for it. I'd get the one getting repercussions because they also weren't emotionally stable, right? Which is which is unfortunately very normal for people like us, for us to have families that are not emotionally stable, um, because obviously we don't live in a place that encourages emotional stability because we have to figure out how to live, right? There are things stressing us out, and yeah, it's not easy for us. So of course we're going to be emotionally and possibly mentally unstable. So whatever the case, if they dropped the ball, if things weren't perfect, I'd get the repercussions as a child. Not because I had to pick up slack. Nobody told me to pick up the slack. That's the funny part. Nobody told me to pick up the slack. I just didn't want the turmoil that comes after. To prevent that turmoil, I started picking up the slack. I started doing things voluntarily. Nobody told me to change diapers, right? Not at first. Then once they saw I got comfortable, it was like, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? By then, I had already given them permission, I guess, right? I had already given them, through my behavior, permission to get me to do things because I was already doing them. Little did they know I was doing them because I just didn't want the aftermath, right? And so sometimes I say all that to say is sometimes we pick up what perfection is. Sometimes we pick up what perfection is not because people told us what was perfect, but because we can identify patterns as people, as human beings. We identify patterns, right? That is um, that is something that we don't stress enough, and it's an important part of the way that we behave in society, because once we see a pattern and we move with it, or we figure out, you know, how to move with it, we move with it, right? And then that creates that memory that I was talking about. So via memory, I thought I had to be perfect, because my memory is, if things aren't perfect, I get punished somehow, right? And that's the same with school. I wasn't the reader in school. I loved math. Math was my thing, and some science, not all science, but I loved math. Reading was not my thing. And so I did not get A's, right? And that kind of told me that I was not perfect, right? That told me I wasn't a perfect reader. That told me that I wasn't, these are things that I've worked on, right? These are things that I have worked on. But at that time, that told me that I wasn't perfect. That told me that I wasn't smart. Told me that I couldn't read, right? Just because I couldn't get an A, I stopped trying. I stopped trying to read. The first time I read a full book, I was 18, right? And not because I couldn't read, but because I was discouraged somehow, right? Especially with that tidbit about, uh, especially thinking that I had to be perfect at home. Forget it. And also, my parents loved A's. A's, they're always like, you gotta go get an A. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing in school? Why aren't you paying attention in school? Why aren't you getting A's? This something's got to give. The way that we are building our children are to be robots in a way. And I don't know what school is like today, but I will say, for people my age, for people who are 30, 31, um, 32, 29, 28, 27, 26. I think even my younger siblings, my youngest siblings, if you're 23, right, even, the way that we were raised was a little robotic. I do hear the schools now are doing better. Um, but so when I was in college, so because I didn't read, right, I didn't know history seriously. Like, when I was in public school, I didn't know if George Washington and Christopher Columbus were happening at the same time. I didn't know if Thomas Jefferson and Christopher Columbus were happening at the same time. That is seriously me in public school, because I did not pay attention. I stopped paying attention. I was discouraged. I did not know what the hell was going on. But when I got to college, I learned a lot, and there's a point to this. And I joined this organization that taught me a lot about history, taught me a lot about history, um, about things that are taught in American history, and things that are kind of put away, things that they don't really mention. And so in that, I was taught about the origins of the family structure in America, um, in Europe, and the origins of um, the structure in education. All that to say, we're obviously, going to school to be workers. We're going to school to have a job, right? To have a career per se, or to have a job. If you went to my kind of schools in the hood of New York City, you went to school to be a worker somehow in McDonald's or something. And I'm not even kidding. That wasn't even a joke. Um, so yeah, the way that we're being taught is kind of weird. Um, and it's kind of like, in that perfection, we are also pretending to be perfect. And in pretending to be perfect, you're missing very key parts about yourself and sharing yourself with others. When you meet someone new with that mindset of having to be perfect, when you meet someone new, you're going to try to be perfect in front of them, not even knowing who's judging the perfection. Remember what I said earlier? Who is judging that perfection? Who is it in your head that is telling you what is perfect and what is not, right? For me, personally, it is the voice that's in my head is everyone that's ever made fun of me. That's serious. Um, and that's something that I had to work on hard. I was in therapy between 2009. I was in therapy between 2010, from 2010 to earlier this year, with like a year, 1 year breaks with 3 different therapists. So that's something that I had to work on. There was a lot of things that I had to work on, and I'm grateful for those 12 or something years of therapy, because I would not have been able to identify this at all. Um, Whatever the case, for me, the voice that tells me what's perfect or what's not is that if anyone's ever picked something, um, if anyone's ever picked on me in some way, I would think it's because that they're picking the part that's not perfect, right? This is the way that I transcribed that pain, that trauma. And so, for instance, when I was in 8th grade, I may have shared this when I was in 8th grade. So I went to many schools. When I was in 8th grade, I only went to 8th grade in that school that 1 year. So I went to 8th grade in that school. I was a new kid in 8th grade, and you graduate after 8th grade. In that graduation in 8th grade, there was a kid that passed around a piece of paper with my face and my name on it with a mustache. And I did not know that that was happening until the very end of the graduation when everyone was leaving. Somebody left a paper behind, and guess who found it? Yeah. And so I thought it was imperfect. I thought it was not perfect for me to have a mustache. I've always had a mustache. And so I tried to get rid of it. Which is crazy. I love my mustache. Um, but somebody made fun of me. I was somebody's target at that time. And so I thought that that wasn't perfection. And there are other things. Funny enough, a lot of the things that people made fun of me for as an adult afterwards, right? Even a lot of the things that people tried to push onto me were things pushed onto them, right? Things projected onto them. They were suffering from the same perfection sickness, and they were trying to make sure that somebody else was, getting that pain somehow. Um, yeah. Speaking of memory, right? And this today went by really fast. We have maybe like 2 or 3 minutes. Um, Speaking of memory, I did want to touch on this before we go. So there are things that happen to you, right? You meet people, things don't go well. Hear me out. Hear this scenario out, right? You meet people, things happen. Let's say something traumatic happens with that person. You end relations with that person, but the memory still stays with you, right? And sometimes when that memory stays with you, you carry on what that person did to you onto other people, right? Sometimes you can think that other people will be the same, that they think the same, that they'll do the same, right? And so parts of your life that aren't relevant to that memory get sucked into that, and you start to get paranoid. And I'm mentioning this because this is something that happened to me this last week. Uh, as I approached my menstrual cycle, I was very emotional this last week, and I started bringing up collective memory, things that people thought of me, things that people did to me, into my present situation, into my present situation that has nothing to do with my past. right? And that's how I know that I need to clear some space. That's how I know that I need to heal some of that trauma, right? I'll give you a very clear example just in case we need that. Um, Let me turn off the timer because it's going to go off in 20 seconds. I was in a somewhat abusive relationship, right? And not somewhat, I was in one. And again, grateful for therapy that helped me through that, right? And I got to a place of self love again. But sometimes it might creep up again, right? I mean, shit. Some of the things that my parents did to me sometimes creep up again. And it's our responsibility, as sad as that may be, to not to one speak that out loud. Hey, I've been hurt in X, Y, and Z way. Um, and so I might have some trauma there. And also, and this is to your loved ones, of course, to the people that you want to call your new family, right? Not just, if you don't feel safe saying this, please do not. This is for safe spaces only, okay? It's your responsibility to speak that, to let your loved ones know what hurts you, right? What has hurt you in the past. And also, it's your responsibility to not bring that into your new relations. That's it. That's what we got today. Thank you for watching. I love hearing or reading. If you want to send me your audio note, send me audio note. But I love reading your responses. I love when you email me back and you're like, B, this hit. I love that. Remember that you're special. Also, remember that after 7:35, I might not be able to let you in. So wait for the recording or catch me next time. Peace.